Hello, my name is Sergio Gascon, and I'm with Max Education Group. And today we're going to start a course in leadership. This is an introduction to leadership, and it'll cover quite a few areas that will introduce you to not only what is leadership and how we begin to define it, how it happens, but also, how does it enable you to be able to lead others. We'll begin with learning about, how us as an individual need to do better in leading ourselves first before we can lead others, and then it'll just grow from there. But before we get into the course, I'd like to give you a brief introduction about who I am. And you'll see on the screen there's a biography about me. And it's just a piece of paper. What it tells you some of the things that I would like you to know about, the achievements that I've had. But more importantly, what I want you to pay attention to is how is it that leadership became such an important part of my life? I was responsible at the University of Southern California for economic development initiatives that were funded primarily by Department of Commerce. And what I did is I partnered that program, that initiative, with the mayor's office of the city of Los Angeles. And so I worked directly with the Office of Economic Development at the mayor's office. And then, of course, I was an employee of the university, and so I led the university on this initiative. And this partnership, as you can imagine, is needed to demonstrate results. And so I was involved with actual businesses in the community, not just surrounding the university, but throughout the country. And so at the end of about 15 years of service with this program, my office was able to deliver assets to these businesses so that they can prosper and grow jobs. Well, those assets were a combination of money, actual financing, and contracts. These are the things that help businesses to grow. And we were able to get these businesses more than 1 billion in those assets that very quickly translated into jobs, thousands of jobs across the country. And then later, due to the success of my office, they wanted us to go to Asia and to match some of these products and services with buyers in Asia. So I was in China, in Korea, in Vietnam, and Japan. And so all in all, we had tremendous success with the program. So finally, I was requested to speak on this success. And to be honest with you, I didn't know what to say. I know I didn't have $1 billion, and I wasn't real, I'm very humble, or at least I try to be. But when I really thought about what happened, it was leadership. And so what I did is I didn't really know the exact details of many businesses, but that I wasn't there to tell people what to do with their business. I was there to tell the CEO, the business owner, the senior management, the teams, all the way down to the receptionist. How do you come together to make a success of the work that you're doing? And so in essence, then what I did is I gave something to these businesses that made them successful. And so that is my starting point to today. I know that we sometimes get lost in the details of, how do I do something? How do I lead a team? And so we many times we isolate ourselves and we forget about those that we're trying to lead. And so what this course is going to do then is begin to introduce you to that essence of how did this all start. And so now that you know a little bit about me, I'd like to now move into the actual introduction to leadership. And I want you to keep in mind that, um, get my presentation here. I want you to keep in mind that what is leadership in your world, in your mind? And when you think about it, I'd like you to ponder for a moment what your definition of leadership is. And if it's helpful to you, you may want to just turn the presentation off for a little bit and think about it. And this is actually very important because you need to start really developing this understanding of, okay, leadership, that doesn't sound too complicated. We lead is telling people what to do, maybe. That's probably what you're thinking. Others might just say, it's people that are role models. Maybe you're thinking, it's about, working together and being the leader. And so again, there could be a multitude of definitions for leadership. I kind of like to have fun actually with, sometimes just looking up or, listening to, people talk about leadership. And so far, I've counted about over 500 different definitions of leadership. And so you can see we seem to just be very flexible about, what leadership is. And so what I'd like you to do is to now begin to think in terms of the roles that we play in leadership. Now, the first role that I'd like to take you to is the family role. Think about this for a minute. At home, who is the leader? I've had some students say to me that they're the leader. And that's wonderful, and I'm actually glad to hear. They're very ambitious, very optimistic. But in the family, your parents are the leaders. And maybe sometimes you don't really think about them as leaders. I don't think maybe they might even use that title. They're your parent, your mom and dad. And what mom and dad do is they support you, they help you, they give you guidance, they do all the things that a leader does, but they never really get that that honor to be called a leader. What about your friendships? When you're with your group of friends, do you talk about leadership? Do you have an assigned leader? And from what I understand, you generally don't. You have many times what I've heard students tell me is, everybody decides together equally, and so then that's how you interact with one another. There's no one person that stands out, and so that type of leadership, and there is leadership in that respect. It's called leadership by committee. And so in essence, if you had a room full of leaders, then everyone has an equal say in the final decision. But I want you to recognize that even though you don't see it now, we'll get into that later, you will recognize that at some point when there's an ultimate decision, somebody says, yeah, that's what we're going to do. Or no, we're not going to do that. And so that becomes the leader. School. Now this one might be a little bit easier, hopefully. Who's the leader at school? Your teacher, the principal. And their roles are very well defined in this structure, I'll call it that. Why? Well, do you have to do what your teacher tells you to do? Yeah, I think so. What if you don't do what they tell you to do? Yeah, there are consequences, right? Many times, it's a visit to the principal's office, and then shortly thereafter, there's a phone call to the parent. So there are rules that you follow, and so as a student, then your role is very well defined as well. You go to school to learn, but you also do it within these confines of the rules that are there for you. Now, what about the community? What is the community? Well, the community is the area in which you reside. Your home is in that community. The school is in that community. When I talk about community, I want you to at least for now think in terms of when you're away from home, when you're away from school, when you're out there. That's the community that I want you to think about. And in that community, there are also leadership roles. You go to the supermarket. Who's in charge of the supermarket? Generally, this person is called the manager. And many times they have a little tag on their shirt and it says that they're manager. That makes them the leader in that institution, in that organization. Go to church. Who's the leader there? Your pastor, the priest, wherever you worship. You go to restaurants. You go to stores. So wherever you are, the gasoline station, there's someone that is always the lead. And so to recognize the fact that these are the leaders of these different organizations is also that we learn our role. And so I hope you begin to see that there's this relationship that we have with leaders. And so then when we begin to understand that relationship, we know that there's two components to leadership. There are the leaders, and so the other ones are followers. And so then this relationship has to coexist in a way that could be very productive. Now, my question, can you be a leader without any followers? Think about it. I would say that you could have great leadership for yourself, but until you share it, you're it's only you. Leadership is about sharing your guidance, your direction, your voice with others. And so every leader must have a follower. Otherwise, it's not a leader. I'll put it to you in another way if I can. If you think you're a leader and you have no followers, I hate to tell you this, but you're just one lonely person walking around. So think about when you feel that this desire that you have about you want to lead something, you want to be able to talk about it and get it to a destination, carry it through a journey. You need followers. And so this is the beginning point of understanding about leadership. Now, I've been already mentioning quite a bit about, roles and, leaders need followers. But let's get to the actual definition that we're going to use for this course. Now, I want you to think about your definition as I state mine. Are you ready? It's going to happen very quick. Leadership is energy that motivates others to act. Leadership is energy that motivates others to act. And now, as you look at this very brief definition, what is energy? I want you to think of energy as something that's going on, something that is being produced. And this energy emanates, it moves, it goes in many directions. Energy by itself, if it doesn't move, it just sits there. It's like, I'll just say it's like the sun. But what it produces is this produces these signals, these sensations that impact others. And sometimes you may not realize that what it's doing, but it's there. It's this force. Now, if it'll help you understand that energy, and I'm not a physics student at that, but I do like to explain the law of physics in terms of this energy. That what I do remember is that a body at rest tends to remain at rest, and a body in motion will stay in motion. And so I want you to think of this energy as that's what it does. It makes the body stay in motion. And if it helps you understand even more this idea of energy, think of influence. Okay, so we can just substitute that word and put influence, replace it with influence. And that's what I'm talking about. Nothing more, nothing less. Influence is energy. Now, motivation. What about this motivation? What is it? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Many times you can sit in a classroom, you're listening to your teachers, and you're just not reacting to it, not really responding to it. You're just kind of just taking it in. But motivation is when you actually start thinking about what the teacher's talking about, really considering, some alternative details that the teacher's not giving, but you're adding to it. Something's happening, and so it's creating curiosity, if nothing else. That's motivation to that energy. And lastly, and this is the important part of leadership, is the action, to act. Now, if you leave that classroom after listening to this great message that the teacher shared with you, and you decide to do something with it, that's the action that I'm referring to. And so in order for this definition to be complete, leadership is energy that motivates others to act, all these components have to happen. If the message or the influence that is shared with you does motivate you up to a certain point, but then the class bell rings and you leave the classroom and you do nothing about it, leadership didn't happen. Okay? And so this is the essence of how I began to explain more things about leadership. And so now let's move on to this a more visual way of how we begin to understand leadership. And so I want to offer, or at least ponder the point, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know who he is or was? And my question, very simple, was he a leader? You know that the great work that he did in the civil rights movement, and he was able to communicate it with millions and millions of people. And what's fascinating about it is that, at least to me, is that he did it without this thing called social media. It was just sheer speech, sheer communication, and it reached the masses throughout. And so ultimately, the result was there was this increased awareness on civil rights. And so if we want to then look at how we define or be able to explain why Martin Luther King Jr. was a leader, is go back to our definition. Leadership is energy that motivates others to act. Did he do that? The answer is yes. Did he do it at a high level? Absolutely. Superior. And so then we can begin to add another adjective to the leadership and say he was a great leader. See how that works? And it's just, you have to meet a certain guideline about the starting to make it a starting point for the conversation of leadership. And so that's how we begin to understand, is somebody a good leader? He's a leader, but he's not a very good leader. Then we can begin to have that conversation in a better way. How about former President Donald Trump? Was he a leader? Now, I don't want to inject politics into our discussion, but my career has required that I work with politicians extensively. Actually, that's a lot of my work was just working with the mayor, working with city councilmen, working with officials in Washington D.C. and the many visitors that we had at the university. And so what's funny about my work is oftentimes people that know me a long time, including my mother, she would from time to time ask me, "Son, what is it exactly that you do?" And I would just answer it with one word: politics. I was constantly in a struggle with, I'll just loosely say, in an affectionate way, trying to make everybody happy. I knew I couldn't make everybody happy, but I knew there was a lot of give and take. There was a lot of negotiation. There was just a lot of just listening and then taking the appropriate actions. And so in my work, I learned very quickly that sometimes you're not going to be very popular. You're going to make some decisions that don't equally, make everybody happy. But that's just the way it needs to be. And it needs, many times in order to get the result as the desired result, that's the way it has to, happen. And so why am I sharing that with you? Well, when I asked the question about Donald Trump, I think that there's at least half of the country that didn't like him. and so just my point is that just because they didn't like him, it just kind of like equated to he's not a good leader. And so I share it in that way, the perspective, because that's not how you define a leader. My mother, bless her heart, she would just sometimes say, "Oh, but he's so handsome," and so that's the reason why she liked the leader, and then that in her mind that made him a good leader, which is really funny. But just remember, for us, we're going to continue to go back to our definition throughout, and so the simple question to ask about whether or not Donald Trump was a leader is, did he satisfy the definition of leadership? And the answer is yes. Adolf Hitler. I'm sure many of you know the person in history. The question, was he a leader? And I have to share this with you on a personal level. The first time when I was majoring in leadership at USC, and I was a student, and this question was posed, I was the one that I actually stood up from my chair, and I said, no. I was emphatic about it. He is not a leader. Well, I got a chuckle from my professors, and after the class, when they had fully explained, how we look at leadership and including the definition, I learned. I admitted, I accepted the fact that he was a leader. Not only was he a leader, but he was a great leader. And I never thought I would ever in my life, say it in that way. Did he achieve his objective of what the atrocity that happened with the Holocaust? Absolutely. And so his leadership, think about it again, in terms of this communication and this motivation that resulted in an action. So he meets the definition of leadership perfectly. Sadly, but true. And so I want you to now, consider that end result doesn't, in essence, explain the leadership. Always, that doesn't make him a good leader, that doesn't make him a bad leader. It was just that they meet the definition of leadership. And then from there, we can then have other conversations that we will about leadership. And so then lastly, your parents, they're leaders. You may not look at them as leaders, call them leaders. They may not call themselves or consider themselves leaders either. But oftentimes I have fun with a question to parents. I had a class once that I asked, who here in the room has children that don't do what you tell them to do? I had some parents raise both their hands. And so I quickly stated, the reason why that happens, why that behavior exists? Because they see you as the parent. They don't see you as a leader. And so what I do then is I provide some advice about changing that perception, that their role, and then go from there. And I've had many parents give me feedback about how much it's helped their relationship with their children. And then lastly, the student, you, are you a leader? And I will answer it very quickly. The potential of you being a leader is definitely within you, and it just needs to be developed and expressed. All right, so we've gotten already halfway through, into this understanding about leadership. And so what I want to do now is I want to just begin to challenge your thinking about the reality of things. My question is, as you see on the screen, perception is reality to others. What is that? Perception is reality to others. Well, perception is a developed view. It is something that comes from within you. And your perception can be very different from mine. Actually, more than likely it will be. And the reason for that is because we have our unique understanding with all our senses, what we see, what we hear, what we speak, what we touch, what we smell, what we taste, and from all of that, our brain, and we're going to talk a lot more about the brain, the neuroscience of it, begins to do what it's supposed to do. And so it happens instantly. You ever walked into a room and met somebody and the person leaves, or you walk away and maybe you say to your friend, I don't like you. Nah, he's all right. I don't know. Oh, wow, she's great. But you just met the person. And so what you don't know just happened is all these, brain signals developed an answer for you in that moment. And that's how quickly, many times, perception occurs. And then also can occur over time, experiences. Can you remember something that happened many years ago? Yeah, you more than likely can. At least one thing that had a tremendous impact on you. And that's there. And that experience, good or bad, develop a certain perception about something in the present. And so that's important because oftentimes we don't give ourselves the opportunity to be more open, to be able to challenge the teacher, your parent, a friend on a point, and just simply, we call it critical thinking, right? I don't see it that way, and so as you begin to share that experience, the other person might say, well, I don't know why you look at it that way, because clearly it's this, and and then you have this dialogue that's going on. But much of that challenge, much of the essence, the substance of that conversation has to do with perception. And the reason why we cannot get away from it is because that's our reality. And so we're dealing with different realities that may not necessarily be true, or at least the truth, and the one truth, I call it. You know, you have your truth, her truth, this truth, that truth, you know. And so what happens here? Well, as long as we interact with human beings, we're going to be dealing with people who reason, individuals who reason. And so because of that reason, it's going to create these different realities. So then what do we do? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to learn about, you know, how leadership is the key, you know, to managing, going through a lot of this, to take it to a point where not only do we all can, you know, get along, but you know, how are you able to you know, be more successful at your desire to reach a certain goal. Maybe you know, it's your goal, but then it could be a team goal, an organization goal. You know, you have school projects at school. You know, how are you going to come together, knowing that okay, everybody's going to reason something that may not necessarily align with mine. How do I bring it into alignment? Okay, and these are the keys. But before we get there, you know, we're recognizing that this perception is truth to every individual. And so that's the reality that you have to go into in order to begin your leadership in a way that's going to be productive. All right. So now that I've introduced this notion of perception as reality to others, let's talk about what goes on in our head. We all, I have my little prop here that I hope you can see it. It's a little, it's a brain, and this organ, you know, resides in our skull, and we think of this brain many times as what tells us what to do. It in essence, it becomes it's who we are as an individual. You ever hear people, you know, express themselves in that way? Well, that's just who I am. Well, that's just what I do. Well, that's just me. You know, and they dismiss it by blaming this guy. That's just what my brain tells me what to do. And to a large extent, it is true. But this brain seems to become their identity. And what I'm going to ask you to do in this course is to detach yourself from this organ and look at it as something that you can actually say, we're in a partnership, and this is what I want you to do, so that this is what I can do. And how I begin to explain that is because generally when we think of, you know, conscious decisions that you make, you know, are you in control of your decisions? You know, and we hear explanations about it many times. You know, did you know what you were doing? And you'll hear people sometimes say, no. So why did you do it? And they'll sometimes even just say, I don't know. My brain told me to do it. Okay, and so, you know, and then there are cases where, you know, yes, this is my decision. This is what I want to do, and so we're referring to, you know, to that decision as an active decision. This is what I did, and when you make active decisions, it's kind of like being the captain of your ship. Okay, you know, you basically give orders, you direct, and that's what happens. Those are active decisions. And I already mentioned, as human beings, we reasoned. We have this ability to decide what we're going to do or what we're not going to do. Now, the interesting part of all of this is that, have you heard, you know, that we use about 10% of our brain capacity? You know, that's pretty crazy, right? Only 10%. And so I have fun with it because I'm like, wow, this thing, and we only use 10% of it. What if we could use a little bit more of it? I mean, it'd be incredible, right? And so, what do you think Einstein, for example, Albert Einstein? I think there was some studies that were performed that were trying to understand about what percentage of his brain power did he actually use, a genius. What do you think that was? They came up with somewhere around 30%. 30%. When I first heard it, I was in shock because I'm like, a genius? And still he uses about 30% of his brain capacity? I only can wonder what the highest percentage of capacity that we would utilize of the brain and what that can do, for not just the person, but for mankind. But anyways, this conscious mind that I've been talking about, I hate to disappoint you, but that is not the control that is making your decisions in a way that you can be more productive. Those are false controls. Every time you think you're in control, you're not. And so now if I got you thinking about it, you're like, wait a minute. So if I'm making these active decisions, I'm making them consciously, I reasoned, and you're telling me that I'm not in control? That's correct. So I want you to think about, go a little bit deeper into this brain, this organ, and I want you to think about the subconscious mind. And if it'll help you to kind of get a visual on it, think of a dot. And there's a dot in this brain. And I will call that your subconscious mind. Doesn't have to be very big, just a dot. And so this subconscious mind is where the true control resides. We'll call it the indirect control, the true control. And how that happens is that you're making very, conscious decisions all the time, and many times you'll do repeated decisions, habits, I'll call them. And say, for example, that you listen to someone that is repeatedly telling you, you're not very smart. And it can happen in many different ways, and you like dismiss it. I just she's being funny. Oh, that's not true. But you hear it often enough that at some point it stays in your brain. And maybe another time you hear it again, and you kind of like, yeah, okay, yeah, I heard it. I know. And so then this piece of information will resurface at certain moments and points in life. There'll be trigger points. It could be an incident. It could be you're seeing it being stated to someone else, and so that creates an emotion, and so then you relive it. This whole notion that you're not very smart. And so the subconscious mind is actually quite powerful. And something else to learn about the subconscious mind is that it acts on the orders given, kind of like a soldier. A general says, pick up this weapon and go kill someone. That kind of order, right? It doesn't. You just do it, and you don't think about it. You don't reason about it. It's automatic. That is how the subconscious mind behaves. It has no emotion. All it knows is that you trained it, you told it, you instructed it, you let it exist, and when a certain moment, trigger point happens, you act on it, just like a soldier. It doesn't reason. I said that already, and it happens 24/7. And this is the scary part, because when you go to bed, does your brain stop working? Does your heart stop working? No, right? You are asleep, you're at rest, but the brain it keeps going. And so the brain will keep processing a lot of what you've given it. And this is where I'm not going to sidetrack the conversation a whole lot, but dreams, why do they happen? And there's been there's still a lot of research being done on dreams, and by explaining the rhythm levels of brain, and how the deeper we reside in the rest, then we go into a space. I'll refer to it as the abyss, the never-ending drop, where the brain is just doing things, and it's funny how sometimes we'll remember some of these dreams. Sometimes we're even semi-consciously aware that the dream is happening. We almost like know what the ending of the dream is going to be like, and then there are other times we're not in that full deep state of rest, and so we wake up, and we don't, we know we dreamt, but we can't explain in detail what the dream was about. It's just another explanation to recognize that the brain is active, very active. And so we're going to talk about later, how then we could influence our own organ, the brain, to motivate it, to act in a certain way, to think about certain things, to begin to develop, this new reality for you. Repeat, repeat, repeat. That's what happens the whole time. And now the last point is 90%. So it's not exactly 90%, but I just thought I'd keep the math simple. If we only use about 10% of our active, brain capacity, then there's other 90% somewhere. So thereof, some percentage. But it sounds like it's a very, very high percentage relative to the 10%. And so I just, introduced this aspect of the brain, the neuroscience, to introduce behavior, and why, oftentimes, we just do something or don't. And really, literally, it has to do with our design. We have this incredible ability to form a behavior, but yet many of us choose not to. And so, but by knowing that this relationship exists in our brain, this conscious and the subconscious mind, and as we begin to at least consider and weigh the contribution that this has on us and our behavior, and how we externalize that understanding, is important, because when you deal with people, do they know what's in your brain? Do you know what's in their brain? We don't. But how do we figure it out? Why is it that I can meet a student and in a moment say, wow, it's a really nice person. I just met the person, right? But we have that ability by knowing that this behavior that we express, we connect it very quickly, and then we form this judgment, this opinion. And so that could be a very good thing, and it could also be a very bad thing. It could also help you explain, why is it that your parents say that you don't do everything that they tell you to do. And so they can only base it on your behavior, your action, or your lack of it. And so, but they don't really know why you didn't do why didn't you make your bed, for example? How many times do I have to remind you to tell you, to make your bed? So these things are would help us understand, or at least now begin to form this understanding that it's the expressed behavior that we have as a clue, as a cue, to how I need to better understand how I'm going to be able to give leadership. to give the influence that will motivate you to take action. So, in closing, I would like to then just remind you that when we are talking about, at least on an organ level, that the heart is generally from the organ that gives us the emotions that we feel, the sensations, all the increased energy, or sometimes the lack of it, the empathy, the understanding of how we view others. All of that generally comes from the heart. There's actually one of my favorite movies. It's an old movie, Jerry Maguire, and there's a scene where he's the agent. He's talking to his client, and he's trying to help or asking for a decision about whether or not he's going to continue working with him, and the person is just pondering the point, and so then Jerry Maguire asks a very simple question: what does your heart tell you? And so what he was getting to there in that scene is the emotion. What are you feeling? And so that's just something to remember, because our brain is really more about logic. And so this is where we get a lot of our organization, a lot of our just very clear devices sometimes, views on things. It's very vertical. I like to think of the heart as circular, as more, a sphere, dynamic. But our brain is just give me the facts. Generally, it's fact driven. And so then when you put these two organs together, I like to at least say, I'm not a scientist, and they can be explained in a much more thorough way. But when you put 1 + 1 together, you put the heart and the brain together like that, that's the behavior that is expressed. And so our discussion on leadership will reside on that level, is this behavior that you're demonstrating is coming from your heart and your your brain, and so we need to know how to manage that relationship, because in most instances, many leaders, they only want to think with the logic, and they failed, or they have a reduced level of emotion. Then there are other leaders that it's all emotion. And you will hear counterpoints of, that doesn't make any sense. I don't know why she wants to do that. And so that explains, that behavior. And so now that, we've come to this real basic introduction, but yet it'll be our foundation for the rest of the course, this thing that we call leadership. And I like to, at this point, just add a quick mention. One of my favorite, scientists, Albert Einstein, once said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." And I enjoy that statement, because we do need to gain an understanding about things, and we do that through education, but education, to a certain extent, is finite. At some point, you're going to, your education is going to come to a stop. After you get your master's, maybe you get a doctorate, and then what happens thereafter is you move you move forward with knowledge, and what you studied in school, and then what you begin to experience in real life. And this is key, as many of you are preparing yourselves, to go into college, to remain in college, to graduate from college, and I always like to have fun with the question, then what? What are you going to do with that? All that academic, education, because you're going to need to apply it. And after school, and so that's where the real life happens. And leadership, leadership I will say this, the real leadership will be revealed when you find yourself in a bad situation. And I hate to put it in that context, but generally that's when we're tested. Our leadership is tested, and then we have to come with an answer. It's complete 180 for what you are experiencing now in school and will continue until you graduate, finish your education. What do you do in school? You learn something, and then you get tested on it to see what you know, and hopefully you score, a top score. But in leadership, it's just the opposite. What happens is you experience. You don't get a chance to study. You don't get a chance necessarily to prepare, but you need to come up with an answer. So you make a decision, and then you find out, and you make adjustments. And there's many things that we're going to talk about in terms of that leadership. And so just remember, leaders get tested first, and then they learn from that experience. And we're going to talk in greater detail about how you can begin to do that today. And that's what I particularly like about this introductory course, is to give you some tools to work with. And so as we move on to so then what is it that we need to do to begin leadership, right? It's where does it start? How do I begin to develop my leadership? Well, I have on the screen is a page full of numbers. Okay, and what I want you to do is I want you to find number 1, and then when you find it, circle it. Look for number 2, circle it. Number 3, number 4. Look for all the sequential order of this on this page. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a minute, and I want you to see just how many numbers you begin to find. Okay, so you might want to turn off the screen for a little bit and do this exercise, but you only get 1 minute. Okay, begin. All right. How many numbers did you find? 20, 30? Is that good? Well, I'm more interested in knowing what was your strategy to finding these numbers? Did you have one? Or were your eyes just kind of all over the place? And then I know some of you have shared, you go across, some of you go by columns, diagonally, and then some of you, as you're looking for the next number, you see the number ahead of that, and so then you know kind of where to go, but a lot of this is just very random. How did it make you feel trying to find these numbers? 1 minute, is that enough time? That's a lot of numbers on that page. What if I told you I want you to identify all the numbers in sequential order in 1 minute? That sounds like a tall task, right? And so generally then that's the experience that I wanted to know about this exercise. Okay. Now what I want you to notice is at the top of the page, in the middle of the page, there's a little dash mark, and directly below it at the bottom of the page there's another little dash mark. What I want you to do is to draw a straight line down the middle of the page connecting those 2 dash marks. And then you'll notice on one side of the page is another little dash mark. And then on the opposite side is another dash mark. Now what I want you to do is to draw a straight line and connect those 2 dash marks. So now what you have is 4 little squares, 4 quadrants. Okay, and now what I want you to notice is that where was number 1? Okay, it was in the top left quadrant. Where is number 2? You'll notice it's on the top right quadrant. Where's number 3? And it's below on the bottom right. And number 4, it's over to the left, in the left quadrant, bottom quadrant. What do you think number 5 is going to be, likely to be? You notice it's up in the left top quadrant. 6, 7, 8. You see a pattern? Okay, I think. And so it's if we follow this pattern, you know, it'd be interesting to see how much faster we could identify these numbers sequentially. So now what I want to do is I'm going to give you another minute, and wherever you left off, I want you to then start from there and now see how many numbers you can identify. Okay, I'll give you a minute. All right, so what happened? How far did you get this time? 50, 60, 70, wow, okay, clearly. I saw many of you, I know many of you would just, you know, just start, you know, circling numbers automatically. You weren't even thinking about it. Why? Because you knew where to go. And so how did that make you feel? Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? You didn't have to think much at all, maybe. You knew where to go. You knew what to do. Did you at some point, this is going to be a strange question, but did you kind of like stop and think, well, instead of following the pattern, I'm just going to go to another, you know, to another part of the quadrant? No, that would be unreasonable, right? Why would you do that? You know, and so when you have a pattern of how you do something and you want to do it quickly and efficiently, you just do it. Okay, and so this little simple exercise that we just completed is all it is an example of a system. And what if we just kind of extrapolate, you know, that to, you know, how is it that you're going to, you know, approach a situation? You know, you need to have a sense of, well, I'm first going to, you know, do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then automatically I'm going to move to this, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, and so we don't think of those decisions as in our daily lives. We don't think of them as a system. It's just kind of sometimes it's just our behavior, our tendency. You know, I usually like to kind of, you know, stand back and look at the situation before I take action. And then there's others that say, no, you know, I'm just going to jump right in and I'm just going to just do something, and then eventually something's going to. We all have different systems, and so leaders have a system that they follow, and they stick to it. And if it doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to be a perfect way, because many times leaders recognize that. And so what we learn to do is to adapt. We're going to talk about that and how that happens. But this little exercise, I like to use it because there's just it's a very simple way of beginning to understand that if you know, there's a quicker way, a better way of doing something, that's what we should do. And so this exercise will take us now to homework. Okay, and this is where we're going to conclude the class. But this little homework, it's going to appear very simple to you, but it's a very important one. Because as we've begun this discussion on leadership and what it is and how it happens, and I already stated, made a comment about before you can lead others, you have to learn to lead yourself. And so how do you lead yourself? Well, you first need to know, who are you? What are your behaviors? What's in that little brain of yours? And how to use that, you know, interact that with the other organ, the heart. And so we need to get, you know, start talking a little bit about you. Okay, and so this exercise that I'm going to ask you to do is it's a personality assessment test. It's been called a character test. You know, and there are many of these types of tests. You might have already taken one. When I was taking my master's in leadership at USC, I took many. And many of these questions were like hundreds of questions. I'm only asking you to do 19. Okay? And it seems very simple, but in actuality, it's very scientific. And so what I want you to do is there are 19 questions. I want you to make a decision on an answer. You're going to have 4 options. So there's 4 columns. And so I want you to pick one of the answers. You can only pick one. If you're kind of 50-50 between 2, pick one. Okay? So you'll only have one answer for each 19 questions, each of the 19 questions. And then at the bottom, you total the columns, and then you'll see some letters at the bottom of the page, D-I-S-C. And so I want you to put the total for each column next to that letter. And next time when we get together, we're going to talk about what these scores represent. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much for today, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.